want to receive some questions from the audience. Please write your name, your affiliation, and then we will pose your question. You talked about the informal sector that will be an obstacle. I want this law to control and regulate the informal sector. No, this will not work. So, for example, when it comes to registration or real estate, if I don't have a law, or if the courts accept non-final contracts, I will not be able to enforce the law. When it comes to the e-commerce, we don't have e-signature. Then how can we use that? I'm sorry, the speaker is not using the microphone. Of course, I agree with you that we should make use of the social media, but we have cyber crime law. So if you post anything on social media, you know what the consequences will be. Then we should make sure that the CPA is independent. All the comments on the Minister of Supplies refers to the fact of having an independent and autonomous CPA. Please, whenever you pose a question, please make sure that you pose it in 1 minute. I have the names, I don't have the questions, so we will take all the questions, and then now Mr. Hatem Mustafa from Electrolux, the floor is yours. Sir, I will try to be very specific and brief. My name is Hatem Mustafa, Electrolux company. It's not a very known family, but we are the agent for Crazy, Zanussi, and most of the big brands come from our company. This is not a misleading ad. We have a big problem. We deal a lot with misleading ads. Epsos poll told us that we incurred 46 million for advertising for fake service centers. So remember the revenue coming from this number. We have two main points on the enforcement. I will give you an example without referring names. We have a court order allowing us to take 3 million pounds from a famous newspaper because the ad reads a service center adopted by EOSA, Zanussi Service Center, Calvinarator Service Center, and this service center is not certified. Yes, it's allowed by a certain body to open a service center, but it's not real ad. The content of the ad should be monitored and filtered. The ad stipulates that this is the certified service center for the Nusi, while it's not. Some of the big satellite channels air misleading ads around the clock, and we have education against this channel, but I don't know what to do with this education. When I go to talk to the channel, they don't care. So what about the enforcement mechanism when it comes to different sectors? And then people ask me, you should be doing something. What should I do more? I go to the court. I have a final award against one of the biggest government newspapers, and they still publish the same misleading ad. What else should I do? What else can I do? We need to have steps for enforcement. I don't want to comment, but I agree 100% with Mr. Tariq. This is not about the consumer protection. I'm very happy with having aggravated penalties. I want to increase the base of my customers. I want to have consumer loyalty. but I don't want this to turn into personal. Whenever I have a problem with the CPA, I should have someone to go back to, because sometimes consumers misabuse their rights. But I find myself in a position where I said, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I will not argue with CPA because of a 9,000 refrigerator. What is the reference here? Then I should just accept it. Accept the calls by the CPA, but sometimes I accept it with a grain of salt. Then we should have a technical reference, a technical body to review the complaint. Also, educate the customers about their rights. You can return the washing machine after 14 days. After using it extensively and excessively for 14 days, of course, things differ, whether this is a car, refrigerator, or a pair of socks. Okay, thank you so much. We will comment at the very end after receiving all the questions. Mr. Tamer Hassan, I have a question. As a consumer, how serious are the recalls in Egypt? Because many products were recalled in the international market, but the companies here in Egypt is not obliged to recall these products. If the company cares for their reputation, you know, Takata Air bag, and the engineer died, and the same car was resold for 4 times. Yeah, but whom did you contact? And what is the system to enforce the law? And who is the body responsible for product recalls? We have Dr. Muhammad from the Ministry of Finance. Referring legal texts to many bodies reflects the weakness of the text, and most of the executive regulation or bylaws make executive branches issue more periodical guidelines for state authorities. That's why many things will be done in violation of the law, and you get many educations in violation of the law, and this reflects the lack of coordination between the state apparatus. So we have an inflation of legal texts, and the same thing can be regulated by many legal texts. Second, most of the legal texts drafted focus more on deterrence, but when it comes to damages or redress, it's not that powerful. Sometimes you get an amount for a damage 10 years ago, and now the same amount shall be issued without taking into consideration the purchasing power of the money or the EGP devaluation. We have many regulatory bodies, and there is a conflict of interest or a conflict of responsibilities or overlapping of tasks. Why don't we have one umbrella body with branches? Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Salem Abdel Ghani, very briefly, please. As for consumer protection, consumers should feel that they are protected, and they don't feel that way now. And Mr. Tari said this is a problem with the market because mainly they deal with informal markets. Regulated markets are few. So all the bodies should work with the CPA to to supervise the final price. The final price should be the responsibility of all the bodies involved. Without giving examples, please, because of the time. Also, how can we protect consumers from the professional fees, from the doctor fees, from the lawyer fees? Consumers are the victims. Doctors can overcharge patients. We should avoid that pitfall because the syndicates cannot face doctors or lawyers or engineers when it comes to pricing their own services. Ms. Manel, a member of the parliament, the floor is yours. Madam, please be very brief. Good afternoon, everyone. This law is very problematic to me because we had wide hopes and very high expectations, and maybe we did wrong to us, to the CPA, and to the law. And also, you did wrong to us as members of the society. We had very high expectations of this law, but when it comes to enforcement on real grounds, most of the complaints received by the CPA are not handled. We know that there is a hotline, there is a WhatsApp group, but at the end of the day, yes, we have a law, but what about the enforcement mechanism? We have brilliant laws, but they are lacking enforcement mechanism on the ground. So, what is the mechanism to ensure that the laws issued are implemented? We still need a mechanism to monitor the issues. We need to have an observatory to measure the impact of the law on the ground. When it comes to fines, the fines should be inconsumate to the product and to the year. But what about the annual increase, taking into consideration the ever increasing inflation thing going in Egypt? And also, this CPA is very short handed. How can you serve all these people with 150 staff? And what about their own capacities? Is the agency able to play all the roles? Or does it have the enough resources? Mr. Tayyip, very briefly. It's one remark. I bought from Souk.com and Jumia, so I use e-commerce a lot, but I never received an invoice. Would you consider the email sent to confirm the order a document or a contract? Mr. Abdelrazi Al-Suwaifi. I will focus on the weaknesses of the law. When it comes to bringing a legal action against the supplier or the manufacturer, this should be delegated by the competent minister. So we have some institutions producing goods and services. So how can the minister hold himself accountable? Also, when it comes to the appointment of the chairperson by the CPA, this is done by the president upon a nomination or a recommendation by the competent minister. So, of course, the chairperson of the CPA will be loyal to the minister who appointed him, simply. Also, when it comes to the resources of the CPA, 25% of the fines and settlements fees. So the CPA will get 25% of the fees for resolving a dispute over a 9,000 refrigerator. Also, we have a question written about the role of the private sector in this system. I will start with Mr. Tare or Mr. Ahmed because I know they have to leave early. Of course, the private sector might be represented through the CV or the NGOs and CVOs, so they are part of it. It's a given, and I mentioned that we had a role to play, and there is a balance when it comes to representation. So I think it's a given. Mr. Ahmed, I want to say something very briefly. When it comes to automotives and Mr. Tariq comments, The minimum thing is to protect the society. All the countries' legislations or the rationale behind binding legislations is to protect the environment, to protect the health of the society. Here in Egypt, we have 100 million Egyptians. We don't have any specification or a standard for a car. Anyone can import any car, and we do not review anything when it comes to emissions, to fumes. With due respect to the recall question, we should have a standard or a specification in the first place. Also, we should supervise the markets. No minister of trade and industry paid enough attention to regulating the market. Why? Because it's a long-term job. All the people are after the short term fruits. We should invest a lot in regulating or supervising markets. And here I'm referring to informal sector, to invoices, to specifications and standards. It's a one big system. I know Mr. Tariq has a meeting and he has to leave, but we are staying. So I'm only giving him an excuse to leave. But we want to keep you. You have many questions to answer. You cannot leave us now. You referred to car recalls. What about the tuk-tuks? The tuk-tuks passes through the army affiliated institutions. They just pay and they drive on the highways. So it's a very big problem. I want to comment on maintenance and service centers. Zanussi company is a very low abiding one, and I had a delegation from Ahmed Al Bakri when he was there, and he told me it's okay, return all the faulty products even if they're not that faulty. Sometimes customers uh, insult manufacturer with such a things, but the CPA has nothing to do with prices when it comes to professional fees. If a doctor asks you to pay 100 Egyptian pounds, then we have nothing to do as CPA. Only if it's a medicine or a priced goods cannot interfere. When it comes to call and recall, the accident you refer to happened in Nasser City, and we inspected that, but it was an exaggerated complaint. On the internet, they find that there's something wrong in America, and then they called us, and we told them this brand or this car is not even available in Egypt. The car is not even being used in Egypt. Well, I disagree with you. I don't work for the CPA. I am an inspector or an observer. So people call me to mediate, to accelerate things of their complaints. I tell them, no, you go call them, get me the complaint registration number. And now the new piece of legislation sets a time of 30 days for the complaint to be handled. But even previously, it was the case. And when I get the complaint registration number, I do nothing. But then people call me to thank me, and I said, I did not interfere. It's the normal cycle to be followed. When it comes to fines being in line with the prices or the value of the currency, there is an article for return. He said according to the market value. So I don't agree with that, because who defines a market value? You bought a car when the dollar was equivalent to 8 Egyptian pounds. Now the dollar is for 20 Egyptian pounds. So when you return the car or when you get a refund, you will not be able to get a similar car. And who defines this market value? When it comes to Uber, Article 60, known as user friendly. We can have a list of manufacturers who have a certificate because they are known for being consumer friendly, and this certificate has a certain procedures and can be renewed. When it comes to criminal cases or legal actions, the board of directors issues a decree, a binding decree for the court to take care of the action. So this is not the job of the minister, this is a job of the board of the directors, not the competent minister. Another comment on what Dr. Tariq said. I did not say that we should stop airing these unregulated satellite channels or the channels that air fake news. I'm also referring to the informal sector when it comes to satellite channels. The same way we have informal sector in any other sector, they violate IP. You are producing a soap opera and the next day it's stolen and aired on air through a channel working in Egypt. And besides this IP violation, they air misleading ads. We are not here referring to a dispute over quality products or low quality products. No, we are referring to products that might harm the health of the citizens. On Facebook and YouTube, you have a kind of regulation. For example, I have the rights of the Egyptian league, football league. No one can air even a minute of a player scoring a goal without my permission. So social media has some kind of regulation. I did not say that we should stop channels from airing. I referred to better regulation of these channels in order to stop misleading ads.